Good morning, everyone. As we start off today, let's just look back at the last 7 days of total accumulated precipitation. I'm still trying to assess the true impact of Hurricane Hilary on the agricultural industry of California. It's something important to remember that California leads the United States in the production of over 40 different fruits and vegetables plus milk. So when you start to see these incredibly heavy rainfalls in Southern California, you see the rain that was added to the Sierra Nevada mountains in through here, which some of them still have snow on top of them here. And we see how this moved into Nevada, parts of Oregon, Idaho, and into Montana. We just need to step back late this week and just see what the true impact on ag was. We've seen a lot of the news coverage on what's done to, just normal civilian life in terms of just the tremendous amount of flooding that we've experienced here. So this is it. This is the total rainfall amounts. And the excessive rainfall warnings that were issued, the tropical storm warnings that were issued, everything the National Weather Service did in this particular case was warranted. So we can just kind of see the full extent of that. Meanwhile, the massive ridge that we've been discussing continues to just kind of build into the central United States. We're going to talk about how long that's going to be around. And also in a little bit, we're going to talk about some more tropical activity coming out of the Atlantic that I want to keep a very close eye on. But I wanted to follow up on something we did last week. So let's go over here to my website, agweather.com, ag-wx.com. You have a couple different ways to access local forecast information. If you're on your phone, just click on this big icon. This is my mobile-friendly version of this. But if you're on the machine, you can just come over here and click here. And let's go to Furnace Creek. Remember, we did this last week. Furnace Creek, California, of course, in the middle of Death Valley. And as we watch the animation here, we're going to see that this is the forecast going back forward. So they're going to crank back up in temperatures, back up into the low 100s. But I wanted to show you the precipitation stats because the amount of rainfall that came through there, which was a 2-inch rainfall event, average annual precipitation for them is 2.5 inches. So they got, almost a full year's worth of rainfall just at one location. Several other locations got quite a bit more. If we take a look at what's going on with the cloud cover, the sun was just starting to rise here, almost to Acadia. So right in through here, one of the first places you can really get a good glimpse of the sun during certain times of year. But if I take you back to yesterday, we can just watch what's left of the cloud field from, I got a new update there. There we go. From Hurricane Hilary just spreading into the Canadian prairie. What you've got circulating here, which added some additional rainfall to California, just take a look at that low pressure system. This is an upper level low. This is not Hilary. And it's important to note as you watch the end of this animation, you can see all the haze from the wildfire smoke that's mixed into the central United States, but you can also see it here in parts of the Pacific Northwest. And the last thing to talk about, which will be a mainstay of this discussion today, is what's going to happen with the next large tropical pulse here, which was named yesterday, and we're going to see where this is going to go following all of this. There's another unique setup here with this tropical system. So as we see the smoke first, this is what we've got for the next 2 days, looking at vertically integrated smoke content. So you can see the smoke getting kind of just swirled around the larger ridge here, but just take note of the additional wildfire smoke we're dealing with in the Pacific Northwest. And this is something I've talked with a lot of growers about. So you have this much smoke in the air getting all the way down to the surface at places. The smoke taint is quite bad for several of the crops up through here. So think about what it could do to hops, or what it could do to the vineyards, or it can do to the tree fruits. That's just a few industries just to think about here in the Pacific Northwest. But as we move forward in this forecast, we have to just take a look at what we've got for tropical activity. So we saw Emily fade. Gert is just spinning around. Franklin is going to move over the island of Hispaniola, possibly become a hurricane once it gets out here into the open Atlantic. But this is our newly named system named Harold. And looking at the National Weather Service, we can kind of get a good look at Harold with 40-knot winds right now. And it's expected to track much farther to the south than we anticipated a week ago. Remember, the strength of this large ridge is a bit stronger than we thought. So it's pushing Harold farther to the south, but it's going to be delivering a lot of rainfall in and throughout the Rio Grande and into Mexico. Now remember from yesterday when we talked about the drought that hit the Panama Canal, and you saw that map of how dry things were in Mexico. This is going to be some critical rains to move across this particular area. So on satellite this morning, this is what Harold looks like. And it is kind of sheared open and pulled apart. That's largely due to the ridge that's present here. This had the potential, had that ridge not been in place, to be a much, much more powerful system. But it's got some pretty healthy convection. And throughout the day today, it's going to get very quickly pulled on the base of this ridge. So you can see it right here. By late this afternoon, it's already going to be pulled across this part of Mexico, the Rio Grande, into southern Texas. So we're going to watch quickly of its moisture spread into this direction. Now again, the size and strength of this high pressure cell is actually going to take the moisture from this clear into Arizona. So what's rare about this is just the last two hurricanes. So Hillary coming in like this, getting pulled so far into the western United States, and then the moisture from this tropical system. Some of it may even reach southeastern parts of California, which is just amazing to see. So with that, let's kind of dig into what we expect to see out of this. We now have replaced the excessive heat warnings with a with tropical storm warning. We've also got the flood watches that are going to be issued here. We still have the flood watches out for parts of Nevada, getting into Oregon and Idaho with the the air quality alerts on the other side due to the smoke. Our expansive excessive heat watches, warnings, and advisories in the midsection of the country. But we're going to put a kind of a deadline on when we think this heat is going to end here. And putting it all together, I'm just going to go straight to one of our high-res models, the NAM. Let's see if we got an update on this. Did we get the 6Z in yet? It's not in yet. Had to record a little earlier today because I'm heading to Des Moines in a little while. So let's take this out to 6 a.m. We're going to be watching some storm activity coming out of Minnesota, Wisconsin. We have the storms that still roll around the western edge of that ridge. And we're going to keep an eye on Harold spreading its rain this morning across southern parts of Texas. Now, as Harold moves over the Rio Grande into Mexico, my attention later today is going to come back up into parts of the Great Lakes as well. So isolated heavy rain in the west, storms in part of the Canadian prairie, but on the cascading kind of downward, or I guess northeastern side of the bigger ridge, okay, coming south, we're going to have to watch for storms possibly getting into the day Tuesday, Wednesday, becoming severe. In this area, going through parts of the Great Lakes into Michigan. So this is pretty early in the morning on Wednesday, and we see what's left of Harold getting pulled, watch this, toward New Mexico and Arizona. But again, this is going to be a pretty stormy region right in through here on some of that northwest flow around that larger ridge. So if we just kind of take you back, notice how some of the models I'm watching right here through Michigan in the overnight are expecting to possibly toss out a squall line through this area. So we'll keep an eye on that very closely. Then playing through Wednesday, notice how the moisture here is getting all the way into Arizona. We could get some of the outer showers and storms getting into this part of California, and then it's going to make this turn right over the Four Corners states. And while that's occurring, this corridor stays open for storms. All right. So today, here's the risk of severe storms here, and there. We get into tomorrow. Again, we're going to watch this area. And this is interesting. On day 3, the Storm Prediction Centers actually brought this all the way into Illinois, Indiana, Ohio for a marginal risk of some stronger storms. So that's why we need to keep an eye on these 2 or I guess 3 corridors in terms of thunderstorm activity. The latest update from the WPC, this is what they've got in terms of total precipitation. So some desperately needed rains coming into parts of the Canadian prairie. More heavy rain for Colorado, capping off what has right now been, near wettest year on record in several climate reporting districts in Colorado. You can see where Harold's moisture is going to go, and then it will eventually come out into this section of the country. Isolated storms in the southeast. Better storm activity here coming through the Great Lakes into New England. And I know you're looking at this going, well, I don't see the storms in Iowa, Indiana, and Ohio showing up like we did in the day 3. This is not being captured very well right now by the WPC, but it's something we just need to be aware of. There will be enough moisture in this area to kick off these storms. So from here, let's go to the European model again just to watch its evolution of this storm system. All right, so we've already seen through here. You can see the Euro is also, through the end of this week, putting down storms into this corridor. We're going to watch late for the moisture here to come out of Colorado and then kind of get squeezed. So there's high pressure to the north. See this? So we have flow around that high pressure like this. We have high pressure to the south, which is like this. And so in between, we kind of get this better lifting motion. So we're going to watch this corridor here and then that corridor there coming into New England. Now, after we get past Saturday, there's a large front that dives in. This is going to end the heat here. And we get into week 2, and this pattern becomes highly amplified. I'm going to show it to you next. But it's starting to increase the chances for rain again across the west. But once we get out there to next, like Wednesday, this is the 29th and 30th, some of the models are attempting to produce some sort of tropical low here in the Gulf of Mexico, and it's showing up with a bit more ensemble support. So let me walk you through all that by looking at a few different maps. This is the 10-day probability of tropical depression development. So this is Harold, okay? We can see the other tropical systems we've been discussing staying out to open ocean. It's this one right here I want you to keep an eye on. Late in the time period, day 8, 9, 10, we're going to see if this brings any of its convection into the Gulf of Mexico to get into this area, potentially move into the southeastern part of the United States. On the on the upper level height side of this, I'll come back to the probabilities in a second. We're playing through Wednesday into Thursday, and what we end up watching is this development of this ridging event here and how it interacts with the lows to its south. You see broad troughing in this area, and all that's going to do is it's going to take this once expansive ridge and squeeze it into this direction. Watch. This is Thursday going into Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. See that? So what happened is we get this high over low pattern here. The ridge that was over Iowa gets drawn back into the Four Corner states. Broader troughing develops in this area by the weekend. So that means cold front coming through this area. So that's through Sunday. We play this out through Monday, Tuesday of next week. And this is kind of a unique pattern. I can't just immediately recall the last time I saw something like this. Trough coming in like this, trough sitting here, deeper trough there, and a sharp ridge tucked in between the two. So we end up getting cooler air east, a lot of heat south, southwest, but storm activity coming off of this. And could we relate it all to El Nino? Sure. I mean, there's always a way to do that, but I just want to watch this pattern evolve. And then what's really interesting is, you know how we keep talking about September having the rebounding warmth? The models continue to go after that. This is September 2nd, 3rd. I think we've really washed out the signal. I don't think the models know what the signal is going to be. I certainly know that the teleconnections like the MJO, which is going to be crossing back over toward phases 3, 4, 5. I know that the position and strength of any tropical system in the Pacific influencing the jet stream level flow. There's a lot of things going on here. But you see it kind of washing out the signal. And that's important. That means that predictability going into early September is not good. So I'm going to stick with our analog forecast we did last time, which is to suggest warmth builds back into this area. Now keep that in the back of your mind. First, I got to show you those precip probability maps now that you've seen the pattern. This is where we have the best chance of grabbing an inch of rain over the next 10 days. You see how high it is with what's left of Harold coming in and interacting here. The heavy rains that are expected in parts of the Canadian prairie. The storm activity in this area, but notice how wet we're looking here along the east. On the drier side of this is the chance of having less than half of an inch. And I don't think that takes much to explain the story that you see here. But watch this. This is now the new week 2 forecast from the CPC, the European model, and the GFS. Both this European model and the CPC have expanded the risk of drier conditions hanging around in the midsection of the country despite cooler weather returning here. And they've increased the wetness for week 2 across the west in both models. So we're going to watch that carefully. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I got to head to Des Moines today, so I want to show you something. Let's just go to Des Moines, start typing it in. There it is. Click 92. That's its city rank. And we get a look at the forecast. Now, notice today, tomorrow, Tuesday, today, 101 degrees Fahrenheit. That's going to be the hottest day. If we click on the multi-model temperature forecast, though, what I want to point out here is why I've had such low confidence in the GFS. The black line is the ECMWF. This shade of color here, this dotted line, that's the national blend of models. The GFS is the dashed one. And it has been so far outside of every other model forecast of temperatures. It's done a terrible job. But here's the heat left this week. This is the cool down for this weekend, and then the return to back to normal temperatures. So this heat wave did not last long, but today is going to be a scorcher in this section of the country. Much hotter than average. We're still hot south, hot in the southeast, cool west. Wednesday, another very hot one in the central the central part of the Corn Belt here. But here's Thursday. Notice the cooler weather watch by Friday. That's the cold front advancing. By Saturday, it's now overtaken much of the Midwest, parts of the Northern Plains in New England. We stay extremely hot across the south. We go into the weekend, that's Saturday into Sunday and Monday with a big cool down. Now we know that starting September, though, I expect the temperatures to rebound, and that's what the newest models are suggesting. So here's the cool down coming in. This is day 5 through 10, so there it is. But you noticed that the models were trying to open the central U.S. through the Canadian prairie, through western North America, back up to near average to above average temperatures. And I think a lot of September is going to see this warmth rebounding with an October that follows it cool. Now, while the United States is watching its temperature pattern really yo-yo a lot here, I want you to see what's going on in Europe. There has been, the forecast for much of this next week or so to have very hot temperatures come back here throughout Europe. So I wanted to point that out to you as well. Some places having temperatures 15 plus degrees above average. And one last thing to kind of hone in on here. This is quite important. The newest update for the next 10 days from the European model is putting down some very early season rains across a lot of Brazil's growing area. We're expecting this drier region here to be wetter as we get into September. But right now, the wettest conditions are being forecast in eastern and northern Brazil. And if this comes in now, what it's going to do is it's going to work hard on eliminating some of the drier soils that are in that area before the monsoon even really begins to get going. And while we've had worry that the monsoon may come in fits and starts, this early moisture into this area will be a strong signal to the Brazilian growers to really go hard after September 15th to plant a crop. This is what we'll watch be undone should El Nino do its typical thing in Argentina, increasing rainfall. But that is the evidence of how powerful that drought was last year during the growing season. And this is also important to know about Argentina's winter wheat crop and its potential condition problems because of a lack of moisture. So I'll leave it there, and we'll come back again tomorrow morning and talk more about where this pattern is going to go and see what those precipitation totals are going to change and look like. So I'll stop. Have a good one, and we'll talk tomorrow. Thanks.